the impact of globalization on countries, it's a good idea to talk about in terms of the economy, and rather than just having general statements like, oh, have a negative effect on the economy, it is better to have lots of different examples how multinationals can affect a country's economy. So the main terms are there. So we've got gross national product, which is GNP, gross domestic product, which is GDP. The balance of payments contains the two terms below in a simplistic term. So the balance of payments contains the current account and the capital account of the country. So I think we're okay with, I'll just do it very quickly. So GDP is the amount of economic activity within a country's borders, so within the actual country itself. So the more people and more businesses that come and operate in the country, the better the GDP is. And countries are always looking to have an improved GDP. That's a sign of a successful country. A country, it shows growth. So, and it shows a healthy economy. So it is important for countries to have a positive and an increasing GDP in order to show that the country is thriving and it's growing. Okay, so it's an accurate indicator of economic health of the country. GNP is to do with the value of goods and services that are produced by the citizens of the country, regardless of where they are, and it's measured on an international, it measures productivity on an international scale. It isn't talked about as much as GDP, but if you're talking about a multinational and its impact on their home country, if they've moved their operations abroad, it will still positively affect the GNP of the home country. So it is worthwhile using both those terms because they're not the same thing. Okay, so sometimes you can't get away with saying the same thing, but these are two separate things. So GDP is within the borders and GNP is out with the borders. So a multinational will affect a country's economy if they're the home country and they move their operations abroad, then it's negatively affecting the GDP, but it's positively affecting the GNP. Now, the balance of payments is made up of two separate accounts. We have the current account and we have the capital account. And it's to do with the transactions, the amount of things that are coming and going. So if you think of a bank account, money going in, money going out. So it's a bit like that. It's a bit like a bank account if you think about it in simplistic terms. So it's to do with it's all the record of all the economic transactions between the country and other places in the world. And it's got two separate parts to it. So the current account is to do with the imports and exports, the amount of money, goods and services that are brought into the country are imports, and the amount of goods and services that are sent out of the country are called exports. Now, as a country, we would want to be we want our current account to be a surplus. We want it to be positive because as a country, we want to be exporting more goods and services to other countries than we do importing goods and services. And because the main reason for that is if we're exporting goods and services abroad, that signifies that the country is generating these goods that are being successfully used and sent abroad. Okay, so that's a good economic thing to aim for, is not to be reliant on products coming into the country from elsewhere. So it's much healthier for a country to have a surplus than it is to have a deficit. So if a multinational is setting up a facility in another country, then what could happen is that if you're still using the raw materials from your home country, then you would be exporting those raw materials to the country abroad where the new facility is, and that would have a positive effect on your current account because it's increasing the exports. Okay, so that's one way of looking at it. Chances are the multinationals go into a lesser developed country because the raw materials are cheaper there. So they might not be exporting the raw materials to that country, but what it could be, it could mean that for the now this is for the host country this time, so where they've come in to the country, it might be that instead of those consumers buying from the UK, those products, they're now being made in the country, so it'd have a positive effect on the host country. It would reduce their imports. So it would have a positive effect on the host country's current account because it would reduce the imports. And it has a positive effect on the home country's current account if they are exporting the raw materials. It depends if they are, if they're not. So that's a good thing. So the current account is to do with the imports and exports. Another thing that happens is so that the multinational has set up in the lesser developed country, and instead of the goods being exported from the UK, they're exported from this country. So say they're in Malaysia and they're exported to the rest of Asia from Malaysia, then that's good for the Malaysian government's current account because it increases their exports. Okay, so it makes their current account more positive. So current account is to do with imports and exports. And whether or not they're bringing in goods, if they're bringing in goods that's not as good, we want to be sending goods out. We want to be exporting goods elsewhere. Okay, so the capital account then is to do with financial transactions. So it's to do with the money being invested into the businesses, the factories in the country. So if you're a multinational and you've set up a factory in another country, you're not investing that money in the home country. So the home country's capital account could be reduced because the money's been invested somewhere else. So for the host country, that's good because that inflow of capital is good for their capital account, so it increases that value, and that's good for the host country. However, the multinational still might send back money to if they've still got a base in the home country. So the home country could benefit from some inflow of capital back into the home country, depending on if they've still got facilities there that they're using. So the balance of payments is between these two accounts, and we want it to be tipped in favour of a surplus for the current account, and we also want to see an inflow of capital into the capital account. Oh, that's just a wee description in there. Okay, Marilla, was that okay, or did you want to ask any questions about that?
No, that was good.
Was that good? Okay.
Yep.
Do you want to have a look at the question? Because the question is similar to just what I was talking about. It's kind of related to just what I was talking about there just now.
Yeah, I'll do
Yep.
that.
Let me post the question back up. Where is it? Somebody came in and then went back out again. Yeah, I thought somebody had come in and gone back out again. So this is an example from the 2022 exam paper, and it's taken from the case study. And what I've done is I've only just selected the part that's relevant to the question. So when you're doing your case study, you'll get about 4 or 5 pages worth of reading to read through. And it can be a little bit daunting when you first start it, but I do recommend that you sit and you just read without any agenda, just sit and read it through once, then go to the question and then think, right, okay, now I'm applying my strategies. Which part of the case study is relevant to my question? So in this question here, this is question 3. It said, explore the impact of Shell's actions in Nigeria, its host country. So just similar to what we were talking about a minute ago. And what I've done is I've just extracted the bit that's relevant to this case study. So you would need to do that yourself. You would need to go, right, okay, let me look at let me look at the question, something to do with the operations in Nigeria. So let me see if I can find a section on that. And they're usually quite well labelled. So it's usually quite easy to spot. And the other thing you must always do is make sure you have a read at the beginning of the case study, because sometimes there's something relevant there, even though it's not under the title, the subtitle. So I'm looking at operations in Nigeria. The first thing I'm going to be looking for is to take extracts out of the case study. So I want to mention something from the case study directly. And then from there, I want to answer the question, which is the impact. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. So I'm going to highlight the fact that it says explore. Did that one highlight? Oh. And then I want to do impacts, and I'm looking at host country. And I keep an eye on the number of marks, so it's 8 marks. So I'm looking at something to do with host country and the impact of Shell's actions on the host country. So I'm going to pull something from the case study first of all. So I'm just reading through the beginning. So despite this, poverty line, all these Shell's critics have accused Shell, the largest oil operator in Nigeria, of causing widespread pollution and environmental damage in the region. So I'm going to start with that. And I'm going to say Shell have caused widespread pollution and environmental damage in Nigeria. And that's my direct quote. Now, I don't get a mark for that, but I have to include it so they know what I'm talking about. So how has that had an impact on Nigeria? We're kind of given the answer by quoting it, but I'm going to just make sure that I'm definitely saying exactly what that means. So they've caused pollution. So maybe we talk about the impact on their citizens. So this could have led to a poorer quality of life for their citizens. So what does pollution cause, or what does the environmental damage do? What does that mean? So it could have a poor quality of life for the citizens, but it could also have damage on the environment. So when we think about the environment, think about the natural habitats. So we could talk about the wildlife and things like farming, for example. So it could also have damaged the local wildlife habitats. Okay, so I've tied it into the case study. I've said what that's has a result of. So it's as a result on the impact on the citizens as well as the environment. Sorry, I'm just going to move. And it could also mean that it would cost money for this. It could have cost money to clean up the damage caused. So the government could have maybe have to pay for that. And this takes money away from other services. Okay, so I'm just kind of saying this is what happened, and here's what could have led to. So it could have led to that, and what the impact is. The impact is that it's cost money to fix this mistake, fix these damaging environmental disasters. What else have we got? Shell is involved in relations with the Nigerian government. According to one of its top executives in Nigeria, Shell has staff members seconded into the different ministries of the Nigerian government. I'm just going to lift this directly, just because obviously I'm on a computer, I can copy and paste it in. You could paraphrase it. Oh, I can't copy and paste it in because I've just not put it in as a picture. So I'm going to say Shell has staff seconded to the Nigerian government. So that's a direct quote from the case study. This means that they could have a larger influence They could have a larger influence on policy made by the government. So they're influencing the government through placing employees there. So the impact is that the government might be, I won't say the word forced, but encouraged into policies that suit Shell more than the country. Okay, so they're having undue pressure over the Nigerian government. So by doing that, it could mean that they've got policies in place. Now, in this particular question, you could also mention the impact on Shell. So I'm going to try and stick to the host country in this particular one. Shell's staff members seconded to the relevant ministries, so it can inform decision-making with their expertise. In addition, there are media reports suggesting that Shell made payments in the past to the Nigerian military in order to prevent protests. So they've been paying off the military to prevent people protesting in the country, which is a bit controlling. So I'm going to use a development mark here, because it's similar to this paying staff. They have also paid the Nigerian military to avoid any protests against the company. Okay, so that bit there would be worth 2 marks. Then we move on to the next section, oil infrastructure. Many pipelines in Nigeria owned by Shell are old and corroded. Shell has acknowledged its responsibility to maintain the pipelines, although in many cases it continues to deny responsibility for subject damage to the environment. This has led to mad protests against Shell from the local inhabitants and international organisations such as Amnesty International and Friends of the Earth. Operational oil spills can be caused by corrosion, a lack of regular maintenance of the equipment. Okay, so let's have a look at the oil infrastructure. So pipelines, the lack of maintenance of the pipelines could lead to environmental damage of which, again, similar to the previous point, but it's a different specific thing. So it's to do with the lack of maintenance this time. Leads environments which the Nigerian government would have to spend money cleaning up. Okay, also the oil spill can have damaging effects on communities. Such as affecting their water supply. So you're talking about the impact on the stakeholders here in the country. So we can talk about the impact on citizens of the country. Okay, so let's have a look at the taxation. In 2019, they were required to pay 20 billion in taxes. So they're in dispute with the Nigerian government, and they were ordered to pay taxes, stated that the tax dispute will delay its final investment required to develop its southwest deepwater oil field facility. Okay, so let's start with the taxation. So the Nigerian government are asking Shell to pay the $20 billion in taxes. This would help them to improve. So if they got this tax money for the government, this would help them to improve local services, such as schools and hospitals. It would also help pay for environmental damage caused. So that's the impact on the government if they got the taxes. However, if Shell refused to pay, then they are threatening to not develop a new field. This would mean the money is not invested in Nigeria and could lead to loss of jobs if it doesn't go ahead. For a development mark here, an increase in unemployment would mean a decrease in tax revenue from income tax. Also, so that's one development mark. I'll just maybe indent that. Also, if so they're not producing this oil field and these 180,000 barrels per day, it will mean that it will have a negative impact on the current account of Nigeria, because the amount they would not be exporting the 180,000 barrels a day. Okay, so the fact if they say to them you have to pay this amount of tax, Shell are saying they don't have the money to build the facility. If they don't have the money to build the facility, it's going to have a negative effect on the exports for Nigeria, because of that facility was going to export 180,000 barrels a day. Okay, it's have a negative effect on the current account. It would also have a negative effect if I go back to the point about unemployment. An increase in unemployment in an area will also have a negative effect on the businesses in the local community. Who may lose money, who may lose sales as a result of people not having money to spend in the local community. Okay, so I've actually made 3 points to do with this thing to do with taxes. I've tied it into the oil field as well. Okay, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's been made 8 points. If I wanted to add another point just to make sure absolutely certain I've not missed anything, I could also mention GDP if I've not already mentioned GDP. So if the facility is not built, it will have a negative. Let's slow. Oops. Negative effect on the GDP of Nigeria. Okay, and that's a solid 8 marks worth. I've got a little bit extra in there just in case. So I've mentioned all the things to do with the host country. I've talked about unemployment. I've talked about GDP. I've talked about the current account and exports. I've spoken about environmental damage. So when you're doing the case study, make sure you're pulling directly from the case study and then telling me what that means, and then giving me the explore part is what does it mean? What is the impact? So the impact is this. The impact is takes money away from services. The impact is that they will have unnecessary influence over the government. The impact is the spills could have a damaging effect on the local community's water supply, and so on. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there if you wanted to copy it down. And what else would you like to do today? I thought that would take a bit longer than it has. So Mirella, is there anything else you want me to go over just now? Or will I get another question from that case study? Sorry?
I don't mind. At the moment, I don't have any questions, but I don't mind.
Okay, so are you copying that down, or are you just going to get a copy of that page when I'm finished?
Yeah, I'm gonna just copy it when you finish.
Okay, well, maybe we'll just do another question from that same paper then. Let me go and have a look at the paper.
Okay.
And see what other question we can do. Yeah, no, that was, oh no, let's have a look. Okay, let's do this one. This is a big 10-mark question. If I just showed you my screen just now, Marilla, remember I was talking about this the other day when I was saying about SQA, which one is it, that one? So can you see this is section 2 of the 2022 paper. We've got 2 10-mark questions in section 2, which is quite unusual, and notice that the last question is a 10-mark question. Okay, so when you're doing your paper, make sure, so there's no 10-mark questions in the first section. So I thought what we would do is this question here as a result of the global pandemic, because this is the first time they've asked a question like this to do with the pandemic. So let me just put that onto a OneNote page, and then I'll answer it on there and you can get the answer at another time. So let me just paste a question on here. So this is question 7, so it's 2022. Question 7. Is it question 7? Yeah, and it's for 10 marks. Okay, before I start this one, let me share my screen back again. Can you think of things that we could jot down to do with the things? Can you remember things that the government did? Let me just get this screen. I'll jot them down as you go through them. So can you remember things that they did?
He introduced furlough, so policies.
Okay, so let's do, I'm just going to make a wee list. Furlough. What else? Do you remember anything else?
Sorry, no, monetary policies and fiscal.
So monetary and fiscal, yes. So monetary means what?
I actually just took the notes of them. I'm not sure.
So monetary is to do with our interest rates and inflation. Okay, so what I'm just going to jot them down here and we'll see how we can relate them to. And what does fiscal policy relate to? Do you know what fiscal policy relates to?
No.
So fiscal policy relates to taxes.
Okay.
Okay, can you name some taxes that you know of?
No, like health tax.
Which one did I mention in the last question when I was looking at? What did I say was a negative impact? It's gone the wrong way. What did I say for that question? Where is it? Can you still see on my screen? Yeah. Where is it? Where did I put it?
They're getting the money for the hospitals and.
Yeah, but what type of taxes?
Oh,
Can you see? Income tax. So so I want to make a little list of taxes. So we've got income tax. What other type of tax do we have?
Unsure.
So we've got VAT. Yeah, value added tax. Yep. And we've got corporation tax. That's the ones that the companies pay.
Okay.
And then we've got things like import duty, but we'll maybe not need for this particular question. So when I've seen this question, I'm thinking, okay, what can I remember about the pandemic and the things that the government did? So we had furlough, so we've got things to do with money. What other things do we have that are not to do with money? What did they?
I mean, they increased the prices in the shops, but that's to do with money. So
Yeah, what can so I suppose we're looking at
like lockdown. They introduced lockdown.
Yeah, so we had different policies to do with social distancing. I'm not sure that's going to help in this question, to be honest. We're writing social distancing down just now anyway. Furlough. What was the things that they were doing? Can you remember round about the July time when they were starting to sort of break down the lockdown? What kind of things were they doing to encourage people to go back into hospitality places? Can you remember what that was called?
Grants. They gave them grants.
They did give them grants, but what was the thing called when you were trying to encourage the general public to go back into restaurants and things? Can you remember what that was called? It had a name. And
incentives.
Yeah, it was an incentive, but it was called Eat Out to Help Out. Do you remember that?
Was it called? Sorry.
It's called Eat Out to Help Out.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Don't know that one. So what they were doing is they'd said to businesses, we will pay your costs. We'll pay your costs. We'll pay 50% of your costs. The government will pay the restaurants and bars and places like that, and it was encouraging people, so we didn't have to pay as much. When you were going to the restaurant, you only paid a certain amount because the companies were getting money back from the government. So the Eat Out to Help Out was an incentive to get people back into the business, and they didn't have to pay as much. So, and the money was coming from the government to the restaurants. So that was a way to get to sort of generate more sort of sales and money coming back into the businesses to help the businesses. Okay, let's have a look at this question then. So we've made a wee note of some of the things that we can talk about. Now, so we are doing, let's see what command word we've got. So we've got explore again. And then we've got methods that they could use to support organisations. So methods, I'm going to split the methods into 3 areas. I wonder if you remember what the 3 areas were. Can you remember our 3 general areas in terms of methods of government intervention? Can you remember our 3 methods? Our 3, areas.
Borrowing.
It was sort of headings we had. So the economic was one of them. And then we had
economic,
legal, that's right. Let's go.
Yeah.
That was a 3. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, now that I've made a wee note of that, I'm going to sort of frame my question around those 3 methods. So I'm going to start with economic because that's the easiest one. So we could use like an economic method of support was the furlough scheme. The furlough scheme. And then I need to explain what the furlough scheme was. Do you know what the furlough scheme was?
Was it to give money to the people to help them out with the businesses?
Yeah, but can you remember, can you tie it down a little bit to be more specific?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so the furlough scheme, what the government did was the government paid 80% of employee wages. Okay, so that's what it was. So instead of you as a business paying your employee wages, the government, well, you paid 20% and the government paid 80%. So that's a huge support to the organisations, because this meant that businesses didn't have to pay as much in wages, which meant they could keep their costs down and still survive through the pandemic. Okay, so the impact was, the method was the furlough scheme. What they did was they paid 80% of the employees' wages. We've not got a mark yet. Where I get the mark is after here. So what that means is that the businesses didn't have to pay wages. They only had to pay 20% wages to the employees, which meant they could keep their costs down. So a further mark would be that they could survive through the pandemic. Okay, so it meant that they were keeping their staff on and they weren't making them redundant. Now, for the government, it helped them because it meant they didn't have to pay more people unemployment benefits. So they would just pay to keep them in employment. So for a lot of businesses, it meant that it kept them open. If they had to pay their wages or they had to pay off the staff, they would have to fold. Okay, so it meant that they could survive. So you would get 2 marks for that. Another economic method is that they reduced the corporation tax. Another method was the reduction in corporation tax. So this meant the businesses, can't spell, could keep more profit and use this to invest in the business further, or to keep the business afloat. Okay, so that helped them out, so they didn't have to pay as much, so they could use the profit to invest in the business further, or just to keep the business afloat, stop it from going under. If we were to look at the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, so that's under political this time. So it wasn't directly a monetary, an economic policy. It was just a temporary political a policy they put in place. The policy of Eat Out to Help Out encouraged consumers to go to local restaurants, etc. And what that meant was, this meant an increase in sales for the business. It would also mean, so this is a separate mark, an increase in profits. Additionally, the government were funding the discount to consumers, so the businesses had even more. They had, let's not say, less expenses. So the government were funding them to run this scheme, so it meant that they had less things to pay for because the government were paying for things. So 3 marks for that little section there on the Eat Out to Help Out. Let's have a look at political. Now, all the legal parts of the pandemic were to do with the social distancing. So there wasn't really anything directly to help businesses. It was really just for to help the health of the nation. So it doesn't really help with this question. So I'm going to talk about grants then. Where are we in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 6, 7, so 3 marks. Grants were issued to to businesses to diversify their business for products required by the pandemic. Can you think of any products that we needed for the pandemic that the government might have given people grants to go and make more of?
Face masks, hand sanitizers.
Yeah, hand sanitizer. So there was a company in Edinburgh that was a distillery, and they got a grant to make, so these turned their distillery from making gin into making hand sanitizers. So these types of grants were given to help businesses develop products that were required during the pandemic. So we could just do e.g. face masks and hand sanitizers. So this would give the businesses an extra revenue stream. Extra revenue stream, 1 mark, which could increase their sales. And Now, have I mentioned profit already? I think I have, so I think I'm going to leave it at increasing their sales. So they've diversified their market, they've diversified their business for one mark. So it increased their revenue stream, and that's increased their sales. They could also say that it helps them survive, but I mentioned that's going to help them survive somewhere else. Anything else I want to do? Reduce corporation tax, reduce other taxes. Yeah, they did. They lowered interest rates on loans. So that would come under economic policy as well. So they lowered interest rates on loans. So if a business needed a loan to survive, that would help them to keep going. So this would allow businesses to borrow more money to help them survive the pandemic. So it would help them maybe pay for things. It would help pay costs with a reduced revenue coming in. Okay, so that's a wee 10 marker question on there. So does that helpful, Marilla? Do you think that was useful to do that just now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have anything else you would like to ask, or thinking about next week? What would you like to do next week? Would you like to do something in current issues, or something on just what we've been doing recently, which is on management theories? Do you have a preference? Not next week, because we're on holiday next week.
Yeah. I don't have a preference, but I was gonna ask about the assignments and when we're starting that.
Yep, so let me have a look at what you've done so far.
Okay.
Where are you? Shoot here. Okay, you can see my screen, so you can see that. So you've chosen HSBC BlackRock. Okay, so what I
Yeah.
would need for you on this page is
I'm
to
just gonna
start.
do HSBC.
Yeah, to start. So we would like you to start collecting your information and putting the links on here. So you can copy and paste information into this section and then put the website link there. And then I also would like you to identify, I've put 3 policies, but 4 would maybe be better. So see if you can
Okay.
find the policies and just again put them on this table, because we're just collating the information together. And then once we've done our so we'll be doing a formal assessment, like a prelim, round about the end of November, beginning of December. And then once we've done that, so the period between then and Christmas holidays, we'll make a start on writing our introduction. And then after the Christmas holidays, we will finish it off. So ideally, the information for you that you need, we want to collect as much information as you can. The second, I'm just going to add to this list here, you're also going to look for news stories relating to your business, and you're also going to look for things to do with their competitors. So what other banks, is it HSBC you're doing, or what's BlackRock? Is it
Yeah. No, it's just HSBC.
just HSBC? Okay.
Yeah.
So you want to look at what their competitors are doing, and your question is around their impacts of their policies. So you want to be looking at HSBC CSR policies and maybe look at the Royal Bank of Scotland CSR policies. What are they doing? Who has won any awards? Have they got any awards for anything? Have they won any awards in the industry, any industry awards around their CSR policies? Do they have any, does the industry have any benchmarks around so for example, like fair trade is a benchmark. You have to achieve so many different categories of if you're using products. So in order for you to be deemed as a fair trade employer or business, then you have to meet certain criteria. So there's certain benchmarks that you have to meet. So what kind of benchmarks are related to their CSR policies? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you would just collect information. So what we'd like to see is some links on here, because we must remember where we got our information from so that we can use that as our sources in our assignment itself. So we need to have the sources as well as the information. And if there's anything, it probably isn't anything on the Behind the Brands link here. Did you manage to sign up for the ft.com website?
Yeah, I did.
You did. So have you done a search on there for HSBC?
No, I have not. Not
Yeah,
yet.
that'll be a good one, because obviously the financialtimes.com is to do with finance. So I'm hoping that you'll find some good information from there about HSBC that you can use. And we're thinking about what their policies. So what are their CSR policies, and how do they have an impact on their stakeholders? So their customers, their employees, their managers, their suppliers, other banks, the government, and so on. Okay, so but we'll get to that bit later. So at the moment, we're just collecting as much information as we can in order to make a start on it. Okay, I'm going to finish up there for today, unless you've got any other questions, and then I'll see you on Wednesday.
Okay, I don't have any questions.
You don't have any questions? Right,
No.
okay, well, thank you for coming along,
Thank you.
and I'll see you on Wednesday.
Bye.
Okay, bye, bye.